Welcome to the Predictive Playbook. I'm your host, John Ryan, and I'm pleased to have Rob Veno in the house here in the studio with me. And Tony Finn will be joining us. He's just been delayed because of another media appearance on the Wager Talk channel. I didn't know how to describe that, Rob, but Rob, welcome to the show. And again, last night we saw the unexpected, and if you would have said to me or Tony last night that Michigan will score less than 50, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have made sure you were okay, or as Tony says, did you eat any mushrooms or drink too much, or is somebody making you say that? But yeah, again, 98 points wins a region. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, a lot of defense, John. As we said yesterday, we didn't expect there to be a lot in the way of turnovers because both teams take care of the ball. So they did just that. UCLA had under 10. I believe their number was maybe 6 or 7 turnovers for the game. Michigan did have 14, I think, which is somewhat rare for them, a little on the high side. But it wasn't an outrageous number of turnovers. So a lot of, in football terms, ball control and clock grinding. There weren't a lot of free throws in that game. UCLA, I think, shot 7 free throws. So what you got was long possessions, a lot of misses. And next thing you know, to me, I actually looked up in the second half, John, and the clock said 2:13 left in the game, and I'm watching the entire game. But it's almost as if it was a running clock last night in that contest. So that's, about the only way you get to 51-49. Michigan, from their standpoint, certainly did underachieved to a miserable degree. I think I had to take to Twitter a couple of times on the play of their point guard and center, that particular combination, Mike Smith and Hunter Dickinson, who, the way I projected that game, Hunter Dickinson at 7-1 had a lot of positive things to do with my projection. And he showed up with nothing but negative things, except for about a 2-minute and 30 span where he got excited and made a couple baskets. I think one by mistake because it smashed off the glass and went in. So, he was a non-factor in that game. He was a UCLA positive, as was Mike Smith, who, the final score of that game, John. Let's run this back just real quick here because I haven't heard it mentioned. Maybe it has been. The final score is 51-49. At the end of the first half, Michigan gets a rebound. Mike Smith drives the length of the court as fast as he can and gets fouled right before the half ends. An 81% free throw shooter goes to the line. What does he do? He misses both free throws. That's the difference in the game if you want to go back that far.
Yep.
So, again, he was not himself. Hunter Dickinson, a freshman, was not himself. And UCLA, Johnny Juzang, what more can you say?
He was on fire.
Yeah, Kentucky. I heard John Calipari called him up and congratulated him after the game. And there's a lot of Kentucky fans today that are, all over Coach Calipari. How did you let that one go? But I think in Juzang's case, it was a case where he just wanted to be closer to home, and he transferred. It wasn't necessarily being driven out by the program. But he was fantastic, to say the least. And after Michigan made the big run in the first half, I think it was like a 9-0 spurt or an 11-0 spurt, which really looked like they were going to take control from there. It was Juzang, the next few possessions in a row, who really brought them straight back. And when he hurt his ankle in the second half, you thought, oh, boy. I think that's when Dickinson made his run. But great game. Hey, listen, Mick Cronin, great coach. He did a great job yesterday. Hey, think about this, too, John, that Dickinson at 7-1, UCLA's big guy fouled out, right? Yeah. So they were on their backup big man and still were able to succeed against that team. Great job by UCLA. What more can you say? They're a gritty team.
Never saw Michigan so out of sorts at times.
Right.
There'd be an open shot at the perimeter and nobody would take it.
Agree.
And it just it looked every single player looked like that. Like you said, that 2 or 3 minute spurt with Dickinson, you thought that was going to maybe light them up as a team, especially the one that he made by possibly mistake. It was pretty hard and high off the glass, but it went in.
Right.
but still, I never thought I'd see Michigan that. Not they weren't rattled. They just didn't know what to do. Like you said about Gonzaga, they do basically walkthroughs for practice. Everybody runs to a spot, and you did see that in the game, the Gonzaga game,
Yeah,
where they
it's
were
evident.
clearly running to a spot on any fast break, and that was great analysis by you. And to a degree, Michigan was the complete opposite. They'd have a chance to run, and they were like standing around waiting for the call to come in from the sidelines. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was. I didn't even mention Franz Wagner, who is a big part of
Yeah.
that offense, who was absolutely atrocious last night in all phases. So it was more than just the point guard and center. Those two stuck out to me, but I have to include him. He airballed a three wide open at the towards the end of the game.
Well, he climbed the layup too, his patented shot,
right.
with the right hand. I mean, he makes that probably 890 times out of 900.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know what the game plan was coming in, but it was nothing like what I thought it would be. So I was dead wrong in my assessment of how they would approach it. We didn't see any 3-point shooting from a team with 40% 3-point shooters, and we didn't see any of those.
And they were all hesitant. They'd get the ball and they were open. I mean, they were open. They were going to get fouled, or they were going to get the shot off, because the defensive guy was at a poor angle, to avoid the foul and also get the hand in the face and the body in front of him. That's why I was kind of sitting there going like, what are they waiting for?
Yeah. No, I agree.
But
I agree.
That
totally.
might not have changed it either.
No,
it
it
like
might
they
not have.
didn't have a game plan really, because they were banging it into the paint with Dickerson there for a while, and then that would stop suddenly, and then everybody was like looking at each other like, well, it's a hot potato. And when they got the ball, it literally was like, well, I gotta get rid of this. Where do I go with it? And I could be completely wrong on that, but that's kind of what I was seeing on the TV. It might have looked different in person, but we were right though on the line with UCLA being a 14-point dog installed, and I think that's been quickly erased. I'm going to bring it up right now, but that. Houston Baylor opened at 133. It was going up at 135. I'm seeing some 134s now. 134 at Westgate, and I'm pretty sure that was 135 not too long ago.
Yes.
And UCLA was opened at 146, now 145. A lot of seems to be under trend. I wouldn't say it's steaming by any stretch of the imagination, but more bets under than not. And that opened at 13.5, and now it's 14. But there again, there were some 14.5s being printed earlier this afternoon. So
yep, I still see one offshore 14.5 as I look here. Yep. But you're right. Universally, it looks like 14's just about.
Yep. And like I said on yesterday's show, more and more I think about it. I don't always use that probability model. Which is a machine learning app. Not trying to impress anybody, but it does a pretty good job, and it does have Houston winning this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had that chance with those kind of numbers every single NCAA tournament, I would do it. I'm not saying that it's actually going to happen, but the value is clearly taking Houston in the futures. Or now you probably take Houston on the money line in this game, which... if that goes down to 4.5 or 4, if say Houston money comes in, then there's probably not too much value in doing that. It's probably better to use the futures market, because they have to win 2 games.
Right.
And arguably the second one is going to be Gonzaga. Do you think initially here in an early look, and I'll never hold it to you if you change your mind, do you think UCLA even can compete with what we saw? At some point Gonzaga will go regression, right? But they seem to be getting better and better. It's not like a fluke like USC's 3-point shooting in the 2 games they had before they got slammed by Gonzaga. But Gonzaga just seems to keep getting better. The chemistry gets better, and it's just a remarkable team.
Yeah, and you know what, John? It doesn't matter what you throw at them. That's the thing. You're always looking like what kind of style would beat Gonzaga. And we saw last night USC, who probably of the remaining teams had one of the best chances because they had interior size, because they had a phenomenal 2-point defense, because they were getting hot from 3-point range. But all that went out the window. We discussed this yesterday. What would the tempo of that game be? And Gonzaga, right from the outset, took it to them, and they were shooting nothing but layups, which, again, as we said yesterday, if this game gets into transition, that 2-point defense of USC's, that allows so impressive, goes out the window because all of a sudden these are uncontested shots at the rim, right? In a half-court defense, they're more contested stuff. Mobley's there. But Mobley looked, again, like he was outworked by Drew Timme. We discussed that yesterday. He was going to be a more physical player. And certainly, I mean, the first 8 minutes of that game looked like, to me, like Drew Timme had heard enough about Evan Mobley. I've heard enough about this guy. I'm going to go out there, chip on the shoulder type deal. You know, look at me. And he made him look – he had – what did he have, 18, 20 points by halftime? So there's so many weapons, John. And to bring this all to a head, to answer your original question, can UCLA compete? What does UCLA do any better than any one of the opponents that Gonzaga has sawed through already, including that preseason, not preseason, but opening season non-conference schedule that we, laid out there yesterday, the teams that they've beaten: Kansas, Virginia, West Virginia, so on and so forth, right? I don't think there's anything UCLA does. Mick Cronin gets an extra week to prepare. He'll come with something, but is that something good? This team will beat you from all angles. And the defense that they showed last night, if they play that against UCLA, Johnny Juzang's going to have a target on his chest for this game. I'm sure Mark Few tells his guys, we're going to know where 3 is at all times on the floor, and he's not going to do to us what he did to Michigan. So I'm with you. I mean, they're 4-0 against the spread in this tournament. I think you brought it up yesterday. However many consecutive double-digit wins it is, they'll have to produce another one to cover this number. But they're phenomenal right now. They're phenomenal. I didn't hear Corey Kispert's name called a lot last night. We're liable to hear it a bunch. The next game, it doesn't matter. They have so many guys. Jalen Suggs played a nice game last night, but they're just too deep, too talented, and too precise, John. That's how I would describe them. The precision with which they work on offense is unlike the others that we're watching here.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to say man among boys, but they're clearly it's like watching Houston when they were so good back in the '80s, just head and shoulders better than everybody else, but they actually never won.
Right?
Is UCLA that team like NC State?
Yeah, where's Jim Valvano when we need him?
Yeah, I mean it's happened. I mean it's not like saying UCLA has absolutely no chance, because we've seen it. At the championship level too, Final Four level. Absolutely, it'll be fun. The good news, Rob, is we have time to ponder it. To think through and make the right bet.
No, we do. Actually, to your point about NC State and Houston, it was either the following year or 2 years later where Raleigh Massimino and Villanova did it to Georgetown as a prohibitive underdog. And what did it take? It took 90% shooting from the field in the second half, but it was done. And they played that game in the low 50s. And what do you know? Georgetown, a heavy favorite, went down to Villanova. So we saw it twice within 3 years back in the mid-'80s. We'll see if we see it again. But right now, as I look at it, like I say, the precision with which Gonzaga runs offense is just these other teams that are involved, Baylor, Houston, UCLA, I think at certain points we've all seen them stumble over themselves a bit. I probably could use a better word, but I think people understand what I mean. Offensively at times, Baylor's probably the most consistent offensive unit of what's left, but it's not on the same level as Gonzaga. And even if I were to project further ahead, I wonder if Baylor's calling card, their pressure defense with the 4 guards, I wonder if that wouldn't just be shredded by Gonzaga's passing. Tony made the great point yesterday. Gonzaga doesn't do it by the dribble. Gonzaga does it with the pass. It's a read and react sport, like we said yesterday, and these guys just seem to read it quick and react really quick and correctly react real quick.
Yeah, it's like it kind of reminds me of those San Antonio Spurs maybe 10 years ago.
Good example.
They were just tremendous passing, and it was precision. I mean, that's the best word you used the whole show about Gonzaga. They don't miss. You know, it's not like you did see with Michigan. You know, kind of an off-target pass. The guy has to reach for it, and by that time, the defender's right on him. You know, and it's tenths of a second matter at this level. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I looked up that '85 Villanova team. That's a good one. Ed Pickney, Dwayne McLean, and Harold Presley all went to the NBA and had pretty good careers.
Yeah, Harold Presley played ball about 15 minutes from my hometown in Trumbull, Connecticut. Gary McLean was the guy we referred to with Tony, who said that mentioned that game. And Gary McLean is the guy, of course, 2 weeks later, he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated admitting that he was high on cocaine playing point guard and winning a national championship. It's crazy, but boy, Raleigh did a good job. Too. It was you know what? That's a little bit of a different case, though, John, because that's a case where those two were from the Big East, and Villanova had seen Georgetown twice previous. UCLA has not seen Gonzaga, and Raleigh, you know, it tried to work on the best game plan after seeing them twice, because I think Georgetown had blown them out twice that season, and you know, you have to execute it perfectly, though. Like I say, 90% second half shooting, that doesn't happen every day.
Now, there was, you mentioned Massimino. I don't know if it was his son. Was R.C. Massimino? Didn't play. He didn't play hardly at all, I don't think, though, that while he was at Villanova. But I don't remember if that was it had to be his son, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't remember whether it was, you know, directly a son or whether it was, you know, nephew or something like that. But little trivia question there, I guess. But you want to take a quick look at the NBA, or do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at the NBA.
Absolutely. That's where my focus was today, anyway. So we can go there.
Yeah. So you know, looking at that Dallas-Boston game, and I'm smiling because on the NBA show at Wager Talk today, my betting system was noticed. It definitely was noticed, and there was one key part of the system that was inadvertently left out by mistake, but it translated the system into one that I would even play with Steve Merrill's money, as he likes to say. So, you know, that system actually supports Dallas tonight, and I do like Dallas tonight as a play. That's one that I have gone to the window. -1 I thought was very cheap price. I try never to say it's a gift because there are no gifts. Everything's earned. But that betting system was pretty funny because the only thing that was mentioned was this 13-1 subset with the opponent scoring 111 points or more in 4 of the last 6 games. And what was missing was that 111 is the league average.
Right.
So when you see it like that, then you go, oh okay, well, you know, he didn't pull it out of his, you know, rear end for that betting system. Actually, that's why he used it. And it did surprise me when I was researching that, the background on that, Rob, that the last 3 seasons have been right around 111 for the entire season. So we're at like, 111.2. It was 110.9 last year, and like 110.6 the year before. So as much as I had thought that the scoring was continuing to go up because of these totals being in the 240s, it's not. So I had a good friend of mine who's a Python geek. You know, I don't look like a geek, but I guess, you know, sometimes my mind works like one maybe. But it was great having him on because, you know, right away I can relate to him because of the analytics and all that stuff, and it gets pretty deep. But he mentioned a very simple thing that ties to this 111 average. So if you simply bet, and by the way, his name is Austin Wang, and you can follow him on Twitter. Just send me a direct message. I'll hook you guys up. Definitely a good follow. So if you simply bet unders 215 or lower, I'm sorry, yeah, 215 or lower, you do really well. And I forget what the result was, but it was extraordinarily good. Conversely, if you do the contrarian thing and bet overs that are 235 or more, you do even better. And that flies in the face of common sense. Every time I see a total of 240 or higher, I don't know about you, Rob, but I think under. And as it turned out here, it's definitely playing the over. So we have a much bigger range of totals this season than any season of the past three, yet the average score of the whole league is basically the same number. So I found that pretty darn interesting. That means the market is, much, much broader with these teams like Brooklyn that, play offense only. Teams like Sacramento. That's a game I think goes way over the total tonight. We can look at that game too if you want to, Rob, if you have anything on that one. But that was one that stuck out too.
Yeah, and that's a game, John, that it's one of those. It's not quite a back-to-back because they had a day between. But these two teams just played 2 days ago, same place, same arena. We've seen a lot of that this season due to COVID. Team flies in, let's play them twice, get them both out of the way. And in that game, it did go over. Yep. In that game, De'Aaron Fox had a big night. The Sacramento Kings had a big night. From a fundamental standpoint, the San Antonio Spurs have become a very small team. LaMarcus Aldridge gone. Jacob Poeltl, the starting center, really the only height on that team, and they become a team of guards and wings. So defensively at the rim, they're not really capable. Unlike most Greg Popovich teams, defense has become secondary in San Antonio. When you get a high-flying machine like Luke Walton, the Sacramento Kings, they're going to score their share of points. And I don't know exactly what adjustments San Antonio can make to prevent that from happening again, other than an off-night shooting by Sacramento, who with Harrison Barnes and with Buddy Hield and with the Iowa State rookie Halliburton, who's become very, very good for them. It's hard to see Sacramento going ice cold with all those players, or at least every one of them going cold. On the other hand, defense has been optional for Sacramento all season long. So, San Antonio, they do have guys that can put it in the basket. DeRozan is still very, very good, even though he doesn't shoot threes. The guard combination in the backcourt of Derek White and Murray, very, very good. Patty Mills off the bench. So, again, it becomes one of those, I usually call them 6'4" and under type games, but it's a little taller than that, 6'6" and under. But an up-and-down pace game where both teams can score. And the other night, John, I'm trying to look real quick here at where that game closed total-wise, because I think the total has been increased for this game. That game closed the other night at 229. And tonight we're showing 230.5 or 231. So they did push it up by a couple of points. It did exceed the 229.5 the other night. But to your previous thoughts about under 215 successful, over 235 successful, and I really think, like you mentioned, it has to do with the variance of these teams. When you go through like a Hollinger's tempo ratings or pace numbers or whatever, and you see the gap between who goes really fast and who goes really, really slow. You put a couple of those slow teams together like Miami and New York the other night, and you wind up with what you wound up with, 98 to 88 or whatever. And, the high-flying teams, the Golden States, the Washingtons, they seem to be able – I noticed this a lot just because I'm strictly a totals player, almost strictly a totals player. I'd say about 80% of my plays released are totals, and my bets are totals in the NBA. The capable offense can carry or will carry in the NBA the less capable or slower paced offense over the total.
Yep.
And this is not talking in terms of 215 and 235 only. This is just like saying there's a game between a real fast-paced team and a slow team, and the number is 220. And I'll generally bet it over the 220 because these fast-paced teams don't play defense. Milwaukee, Washington, Brooklyn, Sacramento, Golden State, on and on. They're there for one reason, to outscore you. And the team that doesn't have the same capability winds up scoring theirs because they're still NBA players. They're still going to get theirs if you allow them to.
True.
And so I think, when you said before that 211 is the average and it hasn't gone up, I think if you asked even 50 of us who do this at Sports Memo and Wager Talk for a living every single day, we'd all find it hard to believe that the average number hasn't increased this year. I think we would all say, no, it has to have gone up because of, there just seems to be more overs and more higher scoring games, but it's fascinating to see that it hasn't gone up at all.
Yeah, I have it right in front of me here. It's 111.7 as we speak. So that must have updated a little bit, but it's still 100. That's 112 rounded. And then per 100 possessions is another interesting stat. I think you like it too. Field goals attempted per 100. Trailblazers are first in the league. Obviously, that implies pace, 92.3, and by comparison, actually the Spurs are fifth. Just seeing that as I'm scrolling down, and then it drops to 85.7 for the Heat, and 85.7 for the Sixers, which is really interesting because they're like 10th in scoring, but they bring the defense. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Clearly Ben Simmons, my choice for Defensive Player of the Year right now. I think if he stays healthy and keeps these numbers going, there's no doubt in my mind. So for a futures bet, I think that's probably worth a look. I don't do player futures bets, mainly because the money sits there. Like in baseball,
right?
Which we'll touch upon, briefly here in a minute. You're putting the money with the book for 6 months, 7 months before you actually get paid. I think you get paid on October 3rd this year. So you figure out the ROI, and all of a sudden, you double your money, but it's over 6 months, and the ROI is still tremendous, but it's not as good as you could have done with other options.
Correct. Yeah.
So
it's crazy, and to the point about Philly being so low, I think you mentioned number 85.7. I think in some ways their number gets skewed because of the top absences that they have. Like just take these last 6 games without Joel Embiid and how much lower scoring these games have been for Philadelphia. Their offensive output, it almost seems like Doc has gone to a let's calm down, let's go slow, let's play defense. We don't have Joel and his, near 30 a game to help us out here because certainly even last night against the Denver team, the game was low. I mean, it was an under, number one, and it was pretty substantially under the total. Even though Denver rattled off 44 first quarter points, I think the next 3 quarters when Philadelphia tightened the clamps and slowed the game down, it was like 22, 20, and 16 after that for the Nuggets. So sometimes the overall numbers are skewed by long-term injury. Ben has been out for a while. Joel obviously has been out for a while. But when they're all together and they're whole, I think Doc prefers to play a little bit quicker and they score a little bit more. But the point about defense, and I know we've been over this before because we're in agreement here. As far as Eastern Conference is concerned, there's no better defensive team in that conference. No, when Phil, and they make me mad sometimes, John, because both of us, we get them here locally, so we see them every single night on the local channel. And when they really want to put their minds to it, they can shut down, in my estimation, anybody.
Yep.
They can shut you down. But they don't always have their heads in it defensively, and that's what gets frustrating sometimes.
The game against Milwaukee, Simmons was playing Giannis. Every single play down the court, and Giannis had one of his worst halves in his career. I think it was his worst. It was the team's worst because they scored 29 points and a half. And that's the thing with Simmons that makes me think that he deserves a lot more attention of what he does that does not appear in the box score. The way he anticipates passes, and he's constantly anticipating what the guy with the ball is going to do, and he does it extraordinarily well. And I've thought that since he came in. When they drafted him, I was ecstatic for the Sixers, absolutely ecstatic. As I figure, all right, this is part of the process, and maybe sometime I'll wear that original shirt. Remember the shirt they gave out at the Sixer games? Yeah, trust the process. Yeah, most people burned those things, but I still have mine. But they're going to be there at the end. Whether they're the 1, 2, or 3 seed, I don't think it really matters. Because the rest of the league is kind of. There's only 5 teams in the Eastern Conference with a winning record. Now, granted, the other guys are only 1 or 2 games under, but still, it's not nearly as good as the West.
No, I think Boston and Miami were considered to be threats preseason. It hasn't turned out that way. Miami, obviously, for injury reasons. I mean, that's a team that hasn't had their group together, but I mean, if they've had them all together 10 times, I'd be surprised. Whether it's Jimmy Butler out, whether it's Goran Dragic out, whether it's Bam Adebayo out, it's always something with them. And Boston, we just can't figure. It's a complete head scratcher that they have been as terrible as they have been, and that a Brad Stevens team plays as little defense as they do. You mentioned the Boston-Dallas game tonight. It wouldn't surprise me if that game goes over the number, because Boston has – if I just look at the last 6 and not being privy to sitting in on their team meetings, the numbers just make it apparent to me that Boston's almost taken the philosophy now. We're a scoring team. We're not a great defensive team, so we have to switch gears and try and outscore people. The acquisition of Evan Fournier probably furthered that thought in my head, because he's a 20 points per game scorer and not known for his defense. So I think that's the approach they're going to take. And I'm just going to circle back to the Sixers real quick. If there ever was such a thing as defensive reserve of the year, then Philly would win both awards, because Matisse Thybulle would be the defensive player of the year for reserves. And I know there's a lot of teams that bring shot blockers off the bench and everything else. Matisse Thybulle is as good of a disruptor on the defensive end as anybody in this league. So Philly's got a lot. It's not just Ben and Joel. They've got a lot of defensive ability.
And he shoots a 3 pretty well too. And when he gets hot, he's hot. He's pretty exciting to see play. I was scrolling through the years here with the scoring average, so I want to make sure I was right. The last 3 years have all been 111 point something. Okay, so this year it's 111.7. Last year was 111.8. The year before that was 111.2. And then 2017-18, 106.
106, wow.
So that's the year. Well, the year after that, 18-19 season, 3 years ago, is when the scoring really picked up. But, you know what I'll do for the show tomorrow? I'll run max min on total. So what was the highest total in each season? What was the lowest total? And see what that range is. And then, there might be anomalies in there too, like, outliers that really shouldn't be there. So I can look at that too and make it more of a true range.
Yeah, because
I'm sure this year is wider than any other season we've ever seen.
And just in comparison, for those watching, if you date yourself back to some of those, 96, 97, 98 playoff matchups between the Charles Oakley, Pat Ewing, New York Knicks, and the Alonzo Mourning Miami Heat.
Yep.
I remember some of those playoff games were total like 179.5, and you'd still bet under, because the game would reach about 168. It was crazy.
It was like watching last night's game.
Yeah.
On a 48-minute scale.
Was. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, some of those. You'd never see that nowadays. That's a half in some games.
Yeah, let's see. What year do you want me to just check this for fun? Like 95? No, that was the Bulls.
Yeah, and I think if you go to Eastern Conference playoff action, maybe, I don't know, 96, 97, whatever it was,
I'll
Ewing
pull
against
96,
Morning.
97 here. That was Iverson's MVP year, too. Let's see here. The league scoring average. Well, I'm looking at the... Hey, I want to look at the Bulls. I want to look at the whole league here. 1 second. All right, here we go. Yeah, what do we have here? Points. 96.9. That was the league average. 96-97 was 96.9.
Yeah, it was a different brand of basketball.
Oh, it was. I mean, it was rough. I mean,
it was rough.
Yep. You know, just look at the Detroit Pistons and Lambeer and the guy named Isaiah wasn't exactly a nice, calm player. I mean, he brought the body too, and he was only like 6 foot and 170.
Yeah, those guards in the mid 90s, we're talking about 96 here, but I mean, in that period, those guards like Gary Payton and Ron Harper, guys that were allowed to hand check back in the day, you couldn't get past those guys. You just couldn't get past those guys. I mean, Michael Jordan obviously was first team all defense every year. You couldn't get past him. It was just a different brand of basketball. And the Eastern Conference especially, I'm leaving out Reggie Miller's Indiana Pacer team with Rick Smits and Dale Davis and those guys. Very tough defensively. But the Eastern Conference, especially at the top, was, I don't want to call it boring, but it was boring basketball to watch because it was like watching paint dry to get points out of those Eastern Conference teams. The West had some high flyers, some teams that could really get up and down throughout the 90s. The majority of their teams played it fast, but boy, oh boy, that Eastern Conference basketball was tough. Oof.
I'm looking at the final right here, just for those that didn't see this because they weren't born yet. Chicago Bulls versus the Miami Heat. The Bulls won 4-1. The Chicago Bulls in Game 5 scored 100, and that's the only time any team scored above 87. So in that Game 5, they beat the Heat by 13. They had 87. Miami Heat won Game 4, 87-80. The Bulls 98-74. Miami, here's one for you. Game 2, Thursday, May 22nd, 1997. Miami Heat 68, the Bulls 75. And I bet you that played under. But those, I mean, it brings back memories, almost like fond memories, but it wasn't. I don't even know if you would have liked it if you liked defense. It was just like they were playing in mud.
Right.
And a lot of physicality. I mean, a lot. You mentioned Charles Oakley. I mean, my God. I mean, but he was on the open floor. It was like you weren't going to take a charge with him.
No, and when you line him up next to Pat Ewing, and I think that team had Charles Smith from University of Pittsburgh. He was like another center playing forward at 6'10", 6'11". It just, you weren't getting by those guys. And they had I think John Starks was a very underrated defensive guard back then, very difficult. He used to always line up against Jordan. And I'm forgetting who the other guard on that team would have been, but you get my point. Obviously, you lived it, so you saw it. But it was wow. Wow. It was not pretty basketball, to say the least. And I think Pat Riley, actually, when he went to Miami, kind of was to the forefront of, he had Alonzo Mourning and his guys, and he kind of started that, play these games in the 80s. And Jeff Van Gundy and the Knicks were fine with it, and Indiana was fine with it. Chicago was fine with it. So it just turned into that. It evolved into yikes.
The all-defensive team that year was Michael Jordan, Karl Malone, Dikembe Mutombo, Gary Payton, Scottie Pippen. Second team was Mookie Blaylock, P.J. Brown, Anthony Mason, Hakeem Olajuwon, and John Stockton.
You know what?
Names from the past.
We did not even mention Anthony Mason on the Knicks. Put him in with Charles Oakley and Pat Ewing. Anthony Mason was a strong man. A
Yep.
strong
And
man, not
big.
afraid to mix it up with anybody.
Yep. There was plenty of times they almost, well, I guess they did have fights.
Mm.
Um, Close, not fist fights, but it came close, I think. But here's one last thing from this season I think is really cool now that I see it. All team, first team all rookie. Sharif Abdur-Rahim.
Oh, loved him.
Yep. Marcus Camby.
You
Allen Iverson. Stephon Marbury. Antoine Walker. All right, now second team. Listen to these names, especially the one, which I'll read last. Ray Allen. Kerry Kittles. Travis Knight. Matt Maloney. And Kobe Bryant. What a list. Kobe Bryant was second team all rookie. That doesn't even make sense. But then you see Iverson, Marbury, Antoine Walker, Marcus Camby, and Raheem. Unreal.
That's a hell of a team. And the second team that you read, the first three names are all Big East guys because obviously being a UConn person, Ray Allen and Travis Knight are both UConn. And then Kerry Kittles, I think was the third name you mentioned, who was Villanova.
Yep.
So three Big East guys there. But that first, I mean, Stephon Marbury was a playground legend in New York. Allen Iverson, we all know the story. Sharif Abdur-Rahim, for those, he might be the least recognized name of all of those by younger generations on that list. At Cal, I think he was on the team with Jason Kidd at Cal. Sharif Abdur-Rahim was an incredible offensive player. I mean, I loved him. I think he started, was he Vancouver or Minnesota? He was one of those two teams, I think. Was he a Grizzly or what was Sharif Abdur-Rahim?
Let me pull it up here.
Vancouver Grizzlies before they became Memphis?
I just lost the page, but I'll go right back to it. Yeah. Oh, here we go. I was looking at Antoine Walker. And he was Skywalker, right? That's
the Kenny Walker
movie. Oh, that's right.
Kenny Walker they're both from Kentucky.
Yeah. Yep.
But Antoine Walker was a heck of a player too.
And you wanted to know who went?
I think Sharif Abdur-Rahim in the pros started with Vancouver Grizzlies.
Yes, drafted by the Vancouver Grizzlies, first round, third pick, third overall, 1996 draft.
Third pick overall.
Yep.
What a draft, John. What a draft. Oh my God.
I guess Kobe was like seventh, right?
Yeah, and he wouldn't play for Charlotte. He just refused and found his way to LA, which, worked out
all the difference
great.
In the world.
Yeah, it worked out great.
It worked out really good. Well, I guess we'll call it for the show today, Rob. I've got dinner date with my wife. I'm sure she made reservations, so I don't mean to cut us off here, but
that's fine.
I think the best bet I have for the show was the over Sacramento Kings game against San Antonio, and then of course Dallas against Boston. I think that's a game that could be a double-digit win. So I have to admit, I was just screwing around last night live in-game, and believe it or not, I won a bet in-game that I didn't deserve to win, which hasn't happened for about a month, with this NCAA tournament. But I took the Sixers plus 10.5 in-game. I turned it off with like 4 minutes to go, and they were down 18, figuring, well, just won't have money for pizza anymore. And then I woke up and I checked and I go, oh my God, they lost by 9. So as I reversed the adage that a blind squirrel finds an acorn. I used the blind acorn finds the squirrel. That's kind of the mode I was in that game. I think that was just dumb luck.
I'll tell you what, at the end, boy, if a couple of threes had fallen for Philly, you would have gotten maybe even a different result. They came on strong in that contest. So, yeah, the NBA is a funny game, right? I mean, the tale of two halves a lot of times in the NBA. Yeah. I remember people used to say, if you want to find out what's happening in an NBA game, just turn on the final 2 minutes and you'll see then, because what happens before then is meaningless. And in some instances, that's true. In most, it's not. But last night, certainly. Like I said, Denver got off to a 44-point first quarter.
Yep.
And after that, stagnant offensively.
Yeah, I was going to mention that they scored 68 and a half and then 36 in the second half.
Yeah.
So almost half as many.
Yeah, you find that a lot in the NBA. It's crazy how it happens, but it does. It does.
And as erratic as that is, the Philly was 22, 23, 26, 24. They're a model of consistency in their loss. But anyway, for the show, we'll go with those two picks if you're good with that. And then we'll look to get back together with our buddy Tony Finn, too. At 4:30ish, 5 every day, I guess, is what we're going to try to do as long as the schedules mesh. So
sounds good. And tomorrow we'll have baseball to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be some games that have already been played.
Mm-hmm.
So I never bet opening day. I don't think you do either. It takes a while for me to, at least a week, to see how things are settling. I know guys that won't bet one until June 1st. And they're pros. So it's such, it is the true definition of marathons, the ultra marathons. Like, those marathon races that human beings do that are 100 miles long. It takes forever. And there's really no rush to start guessing at some of these games. But anyway, Rob, do you have anything going on over at Wager Talk you want to mention?
I do. In fact, tonight in the NBA, we have a pair of best bets up and available right now at wagertalk.com. 4% best bets, 2 of them in the NBA. It's part of a 4-play card. So if you're interested in NBA tonight, and I'm a guy who waits till later in the day to release, especially with NBA, because as you guys all know, trying to find out who's in and who's out, it's tricky. I usually wait for the 5:30 injury report, which just came out while we were on. You might have saw me turning my head a couple of times. I was actually trying to examine what was going on tonight in the league. So they are up and available right now. Go catch them at wagertalk.com. NBA, last 3 years combined, the #1 handicapper at Wager Talk. So we've been good. It's been a good run since 2018
awesome.
with the NBA.
It's congratulations to that. And for those that aren't that familiar with Wager Talk, when you're #1 at Wager Talk, that's the elite. It's the best of the very best. And I can't emphasize that enough. That is truly being the big fish in the big enormous pond as opposed to the big fish in the small pond, which I hate. But that's a great job, Rob. Congratulations on that. That's something to be very proud of, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been a good run.
Yep. So for the Predictive Playbook and Rob Veno and RobVenoSports.com, I am John Ryan, and may all the wins be yours.